Hi, my name's Murray Hallett. Whoa, look at that, what a beauty. And I want to show you around my aquaponics setup. From now on, this fish will grow much more slowly, but it's possible it will get up to 5 or 6 kilos if I keep it long enough. There's a lot of mystery surrounding aquaponics, but we want to demystify that totally for you in this video. So if we've got a 1,000 litre tank, for example, we can have 1,000 litres in volume of grow bed. Look at this beautiful fish. Today we'll show you several different systems and how they work. And what will happen is then the water will be sucked up through these slots. Then you simply slide the lock up and that's all there is to it. We'll show you how to assemble a system. You must never get them mixed up. They must always stay red to red and black to black. We'll show you how to assemble a system from recycled materials if that's what you want to do. Or how to assemble a system that you've pre-purchased all ready to go in a kit form. By the time you get to the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to put an aquaponics system together. If you get down to this level, and if you get down to here, you're going to have dead fish, I'm sorry to tell you. You'll understand how it all works, you'll understand what to do to make it work properly, you'll understand about the bacteria and all the other things put up as mysteries by people, but you'll understand how to make it work so that you can produce beautiful, clean, organic fruit and vegetables and fish at your place. What is aquaponics? Aquaponics is the successful integration of the best of aquaculture and the best of hydroponics. In aquaculture, the fish are fed, the fish are raised in either ponds or tanks or enclosures, and the fish are fed, and the fish of course produce waste. And dealing with that waste becomes a real problem in aquaculture projects. Very elaborate filtration systems are used to try and keep the water pure, but eventually the water has to be discarded, and the water is pumped out into dams or into rivers or local streams or some way of being disposed of, which can become a problem. Hydroponics has a similar problem in that hydroponics uses nice clean water that they add nutrient chemicals to, and as it is circulated and the plants are grown, some of those nutrients become out of balance, and eventually that water nutrient mixture has to be replaced and water has to be discarded. And once again, that nutrient rich water is discarded in creeks or rivers or dams or in some kind of enclosure, and it becomes a problem for those kind of technologies. But in aquaponics we don't have those problems because we can continuously, never-endingly recirculate the water, because the water comes from the fish tank, nutrient rich. Those nutrients are converted by good bacteria to nutrients that the plants can use. The plants consume the nutrients and the water is returned to the fish tank clean for the fish to use it again. So it's a closed loop system, and that must be understood from day one, and that's what makes aquaponics so absolutely wonderful, especially in a dry, thirsty land like Australia where water is at an absolute minimum. We can have a high density food production system that produces both plant matter and fish in the one system for the absolute minimum of water usage. This is our basic balcony kit, and I'm going to demonstrate today how we assemble one of these. If you've just received this delivered to your home, what the steps you'd go through to assemble it. And during that process we're going to explain how you make sure that the system is cycled and that the fish are happy and the plants are going to grow really well. So as part of that process we'll cover all those aspects when we assemble this kit. So let's get started. First step in positioning our tank is to make sure that it is level. If you're placing the tank on a sand bed like I'm doing here, or perhaps on your back patio, which may be already a concrete patio or a paved patio, you need to pick a site that is nice and level. It needs to actually make sure that it's a level from side to side. It must be level. If for example you've got a concrete patio, front patio, generally they fall away a little bit to the outside to allow rain to run off, so you need to position it so that the fall is from the back to the front, so that the front may be slightly lower than the back, but crossways from side to side the system needs to be level. So use a good quality spirit level to check that yours is level, and if it's not and you're on a sand base, you can do something about that quite easily. You can just get some more sand and you can level the site. Make sure you take a bit of time to make sure that the tank is sitting on a good firm base. if you're using a sand base, because together with the weight of the water, the weight of the gravel and the weight of the fish, you're going to have an item here that weighs about 1.5 tons, so it's quite heavy. So you just can't put it on any old rickety base, because otherwise you'll have problems. Next thing is to get our fiberglass grow bed and position it on top of the fish tank. As you can see, sits neatly atop the system, and interestingly this system has been designed to withstand all the rigours that will come against it as it is built and as it is used over the years. And being fiberglass, it's perfectly strong enough to hold the weight of the grow bed, which will have the gravel in it and also water in it. And when this is filled up in operation, this grow bed will actually weigh close to 300 kilograms in weight. So it's quite a bit of weight to be supported by the tank. And this tank has been structurally designed to hold that weight for you. I've got the pump that's supplied with the kit, and also the piece of pre-made plumbing. And this plumbing will bring the water up from the pump out of the tank and deliver it to the grow bed. And you'll notice we've used these really clever, very nice snap together fittings, so that at some time in the future, should you need to clean your pump or clean the pipe work in any way, it's very easy to pull apart. So first of all, I'll just start to assemble this, and we've got here what we call a double nut fitting, which will go through here and provide the entry point for the water to enter the tank. Now it's a good idea to put some Sikaflex or some silicone on this, and then we screw the nut onto the inside of the tank. Having cleaned the excess off, we'll now screw on, and this just has to be hand tight. It doesn't have any thread tape or anything on it. We just screw that on, and that's just simply used to direct the flow of water down and allows us to inspect the water flow at any time. It just remains like that. Okay, the next step is to attach our pump. This is our pump that's provided with the kit. This is a very special little pump, very low wattage draw, so it's ready for our solar ready kits, as we call them. And we have fitted on it, pre-fitted, one of these snap-on fittings again. So I'll just show you how we do this. We just fit that to the end of the hose like so. You can see the O-ring there. Push it on tight. Notice the little jaws that clip over the edge of the white fitting, and then you simply slide the lock up, and that's all there is to it. This pump has got a nice fish filter on it that'll stop the little tiny fish from getting drawn into your pump, and that can be removed at any time for cleaning should you so desire, just simply by screwing it off. See how easy that is? And as an intermediate clean, when the tank is in the when the pump is actually in the tank, you can just do that, and that will, as you can see that action there, that will help some of the solids that may get caught on here to move on up through the pump away to the grow bed. So there's two levels of cleaning you can do. That's level 1, and level 2, if it gets really bad, you can just simply take that off. You can remove the pump like this and take the pump away and give it a good clean. If you're wondering what this is a tap that we've put a bypass line in, and this enables us to adjust the flow by using this little tap to allow probably half the water to bypass and spray out over the surface of the fish tank, thus adding to the aeration that occurs in adding oxygen to the water for the fish. And that adds to aeration and also allows us to get rid of a little bit of the pressure in the pump, because this pump is actually a little bit stronger than is needed for this one grow bed. And that would allow us later to add more grow beds to this kit if we so desired, and this pump will do the job. So that's, you just adjust that to get the flow right. And up here at this tap here, we can adjust that as well to get the flow right into our grow bed. And we'll go through that a little bit later on to show you why that is important. It's important to get the flow right into the grow bed so that our auto siphon device will work correctly. Once again, you'll see we've got these snap-on fittings everywhere. You can take anything off at any time and give it a clean if you need to, and it's just so easy to take on and off. The next thing we're going to install is our backup pump. This pump is a 12-volt pump that runs off a 12-volt battery, like a car battery, and once again it's a high-quality marine bilge pump that we've chosen for the job. And once again, our non-kink hose, which is very important, we believe. I know you could use a cheaper hose, but it's a very good hose. It won't kink, see, non-kink. And once again, we've used the safety fittings, the safety clamps, and it's all set up ready for you. As to the wiring, this is the wiring that comes with the pump, and there we've done a join to give you an extension lead, and that join has got soldered joins and shrink wrap over it so that you won't have any electrical interference later on. Now we're going to place this in the fish tank, down beside the main pump like that, and we're going to attach it to the side of the main pump with a cable tie. which is provided in the kit. So we'll just put a cable tie around it here to hold it to the pump. Okay, and that's about all you need to do really. And the idea of that is that this 90-degree fitting here will once again spray the water out over the surface and cause the water to be aerated or oxygenated should the mains power go off. Once again, we'll run this lead to wherever it's suitable to you. If you want to extend it and go up over there to some other place, or if you want to come neatly over the side to a battery pack down beside your tank, that would be a good idea as well. This is our backup power fail switch. Inside this switch is a little special little relay in here that senses the 240 volts or mains power, and this simply plugs into the nearest power point, and that acts as a sensor, and that keeps the relay in its right position. Should the power go off, should the mains power go off, instantly it will switch the battery on, and this is the other two leads. This lead goes to your battery, and as you can see we already provide the marine quality battery clamps to go onto your battery. And what you need to purchase is a good quality car battery, a four-wheel drive battery, or if you want to spend the money, go to a battery that is a long life battery, that is a deep cycle battery. And then on this end of the leads, the little fitting is provided that you'll clamp on to the wire that comes from the pump that's resident inside the tank. So that's the basis of the backup system. An absolute necessity when you've got fish, because if fish go without air for any length of time, they will die. It's as simple as that. So they must have air into the water to provide oxygen. You must have dissolved oxygen in the water in plenty of supply, and this is what this will ensure will happen. I just want to show you how to connect up the 12-volt backup pump to the fail-safe switch and the battery power supply. We provide these little connectors here, which are high-grade connectors, and you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver, and you just loosen that off because they come tightened on. We just loosen it off sufficiently so that we can get it off. And then we get the red wire from the pump, from the 12-volt backup pump, and we put the two wires together. The two red wires must go together, and then we put this device back on again and get the wires to go right to the back of it. Just need to loosen that a little bit more. Okay. Get the wires to go right to the back of it, like that, and then tighten up the screw. Not over tight, but just nice and firm so that the wires can't come out. There we go. Now we'll do the same with the black wire. The black wire is negative and the red wire is positive. We must never get them mixed up. They must always stay red to red and black to black. Once again, nice and neatly, just twitch them together. If you've got soft hands, you might have to have a pair of gloves while you're doing this perhaps. And then just tighten it up nice and tight. Not over tight, just firmly, like that. Now we've got a beautiful join that is electrically sound, and it's also insulated, and it's safe. Mind you, it's only carrying 12 volts of DC current, so no one could get electrocuted with that, but it's still safe and it's still sound, and that's the main thing. And then of course we want to run our wires away from the grow bed and from the tank, and perhaps you might like to use one of the cable ties that's provided just to hold it to there nice and neatly, and then you run it away to your battery and connect up to your battery. And remember to plug this into your 240 volt source, or your mains power source, the same as your pump, and your system is ready to go. What will happen with that is, if the mains power goes off at any time, the backup switch will sense that, and it will immediately turn on the 12 volt backup pump to spray water over the top of the fish tank water. You'll notice that we will need at least 3 mains power points in order to run our system. So if you're getting your electrician to come in prior to the kit arriving to install some power points nearby, make sure you get at least 3, and I'd advise you to get 4, because you may want an extra one later on in winter time to run an aquarium heater to heat the water. So you need at least 4 power points is what I'd advise you to have. Our water pump only takes 30 watts, our aerator only takes 5 or 6 watts, and our failover switch actually draws nothing. It's just a sensor that senses what's going on. Later on, if you were to add an aquarium heater for winter time, that could be 300 or 400 watt load. So even then the load is not very high. So a power board is quite suitable if you only have 1 power point. But it would be ideal to have 4 power points. We'll now install the auto siphon device, and there are several parts to the auto siphon device. This of course is the part that goes through the tank. We refer to this as the upstand, and I'll show you in a few moments how we'll install that. This part is the bell of the bell siphon inside, and this part is the outer surround, which is drilled to allow water to pass through, and that keeps the media, the stones or the gravel, away from the bell device. And we'll now proceed to put this together, and I'll show you how it works. First of all, we'll undo the nut here. You'll see it comes with a couple of washers, but I don't entirely trust the washers personally. We'll use that one on the inside, and on the outside I'll dispense with this rubber washer, and I'll use some of the good old trusty Sikaflex again. Put a bead of Sikaflex around it so we don't have any leaks. So we'll just run a bead of Sikaflex around like that, so when we tighten the nut up we'll get a good seal. So I'll have to reach under here now and screw that on. Once again, because we're using some Sikaflex on it, or some good marine grade silicone, we only need to do it hand tight, just slightly tighter than hand tight. That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be, you know, really screwed on in big measure. Then of course we'll then screw our upstand actually into the tank fitting. I'll just show you how that goes in. As you can see, it's just a threaded end and goes into this threaded part of the thing. We don't need to put any sealing tape on it or anything like that, because it doesn't matter if it does actually leak a little bit through, it doesn't matter. So we'll just screw that down once again, hand tight, no tighter than hand tight, because you may want to get it out one day for cleaning, and if it's too tight you won't be able to get it out. So that's just hand tight. The next thing that would go on top of here is the bell, and this actually creates the siphon, and that just simply sits on top like that. You can see we've got some slots cut in it, and we've also got a little tube here. The way it works is that when the tank fills up with water and starts to flow over the top, because this is over the top of it, it will create a suction, and what will happen is then the water will be sucked up through these slots, up through the bell and down through the pipe to the fish tank below. And it will do that until the water level reaches the bottom of this pipe, and when it reaches the bottom of this pipe, air will be sucked through this pipe into the top of the bell, which will break the siphon, and so the cycle will cease. Okay, so that sits in there like that. Our surround goes around the top of it, and you see we've got a screw-on cap to protect the whole thing and stop rubbish getting inside. Now the last thing we need to do is fit this little device on the bottom, which is just simply an outlet pipe and we have that loose and not glued, so that we can adjust it a little bit to get the flow right. So I'll just screw that on. And once again, it only needs to be hand tight. It doesn't need to be screwed on with any great force. We'll just put this fitting on the end of it so we can adjust that a little bit later on up and down to get our flow right. Okay, the next job now is to put the gravel into the grow bed. And we've chosen to use very nice expanded clay beads for our gravel, because it's just so nice to use, and secondly it's convenient for people that live in home units or in city places that want to have a balcony kit, because they simply can't go to the gravel shop and buy gravel, and so we provide this wonderful stuff. We need to make sure that there's no of these lovely clay beads inside the bell siphon chamber, because if there are, they may block it up at a later time when the water starts to flow. So when you get to about this stage, just make sure that you've got nothing in the way, and there's no glass beads, no clay beads in the area. You can see they're like marbles, they like to be where they're not supposed to be. So we'll put this back on now. We've made sure they're all free and out of the way. Now a little trick that I try and tell people this is, get a house brick and put it on top of there at this time to make sure that stays down. And there's another good reason for that, because when you start to cycle the system and water is going through it, initially these lovely clay beads, they try and float until a few days it takes for them to soak up some water and not float up and down with the water level. So we've got a house brick here we'll just put on it. We only need to leave that there for 3 or 4 days just to make sure that doesn't move. We'll now continue to put our clay beads into the bed. We like to have a depth of 300 millimetres of grow bed. That's been proven over a long period of time to be an optimum depth for grow beds in aquaponic systems. If you were to try and substitute and have a grow bed by some kind of tray that's say only 150 millimetres deep or 6 inches, you'll still get growth and it'll still work, but it just won't work as well. You won't have the same lush, vigorous growth that you get when the grow bed is at least 300 millimetres deep. The last thing we're going to put on is the kiddie cover. The wooden kiddie cover that's provided with the kit. That just sits atop here. We've got a groove cut out for the pipes and the wires to go through. Slide that into place. There we've got a kiddie cover. Doubles also as a seat when you want to have your barbecue. You're sitting around barbecuing your fish, you can sit here and have your barbecue on top of the kiddie cover. And that's made of sufficiently weight to stop children from getting in. If you wanted to, you could attach a lock to there. There's only one thing left to be done now, and that's to fit our aerator. And I'll just go and get that now. This is our aerator kit, it comes with it. This operates on mains power. You'll see provided in the kit is the actual aerator pump. Four air stones and a quantity of airline. Just show how 6 metres of airline are provided. So we'll divide that up equally. Fasten an airline to each exit point on the pump just by pushing it over, and then of course we put an air stone in the end of each airline. We'll put the airlines down through this same hole so that they go into the tank to provide plenty of aeration for the fish, and that can sit neatly right here beside the pipe outlets. And of course we'll run this lead off to our 240 volt or mains power supply. Oxygen delivery to the water is very important. It can't be emphasised too much. Some people worry that they might be putting too much air into the water. You really can't do that, because if you're putting a lot of air into the water will only uptake as much oxygen as it can until it's saturated, and the rest will just go back into the atmosphere anyway. It's best to have too much than not enough. If you're going to err one side or the other, err on the side of too much. Make sure you've got water movement and oxygen going into the water at all times. If you imagine the tank was populated by a whole lot of small fish, you know, it's populated fairly well. If the water flow stopped and the air stopped, we would have dead fish in 45 minutes. It's that quick. The oxygen levels drop and the fish start to die. The sad part about that is you may come along and find it. You may only have 1 or 2 dead fish. You'll get the oxygen supply going again, but unfortunately over the next 4 or 5 days you'll have fish that will continually die because their gills have been damaged and they never quite recover from it. That's why we have backup systems in all our tanks. The next step is to add the water. We'll need about 900 litres of water to go into this system, so we'll fill it nice and slowly. And perhaps too at the same time we might wet the stones down a little bit, so we'll spray some water on them. Some people may like to wash the stones first and make sure there's no red dust getting into their system, but I don't bother doing that because to me it's a waste of water. Because where I live, we're on tank water only. We rely on rain tank water, so we can't afford to waste any water. And that's one of the wonderful things about aquaponics, is it's very water wise. To me it's a sin to waste water just to wash stones, when the system will take care of the dirt anyway. So you'll find that when you first cycle the system, we'll find that we'll get a lot of red dust coming off that into the tank, but I find about 2 to 3 days later the red dust is all gone. It's all gone back into the bottom of the grow bed, and that's just how wonderful the filter system it is. It even filters itself and remove that. There are different kinds of water that you may wonder are okay to use or not. We're using tank water out of my own household tank at the moment. We're filling the bed with it, but you may only have access to town water, for example, or dam water. Now the dam water is fine, provided you get it tested and make sure that there are living organisms in them. Most dam water already has small fish living in it anyway, so it's going to be fine to use for your fish. Town water, if it's been chlorinated, which most town water is, you'll need to fill your tank and you'll need to circulate it for 2 or 3 days with the air stones going to boil all the chlorine out of the water. If you've got any doubt, go and get it tested. but I really don't think you need to do that. So you can use tank water, dam water or town water. It will take about 900 litres to fill this tank, but for the sake of today's exercise we'll only fill to about here to start with, so we've got a little bit of freeboard. And also we want it to be just below the level of our outlet that you can see in under here. So the level of the water should be just at the bottom of that. And when the water drops down an inch or two, then it's time to put a bit more water in. There are two ways to get your seedlings. You can raise them yourself from your own seed, which is what I personally prefer to do. But you can also go to the nearest seedling shop and buy some seedlings. There are plenty of them around, and for a quick start that might be what you'd like to do. And I've gone up to the local seedling shop here and I've purchased some Lebanese cucumbers, and I'm going to show you how to plant them into our grow bed. Because I'm using these beautiful, nice, clean beads, I don't really want to put any of the dirt from the nursery into my system, because there may be some diseases in that. I really don't know, but there may be. There probably isn't, but there may be. So what I'll do is I'll wash the roots first to get all that media off that came with the plant. Wash them in a bucket of fresh water. And there I've got the seedling with a nice root, and I'll just go here and I'll just bury my hand down there and push the seedling right down in. And you can see how easy that is. And when the water's circulating up and down and that all the time, remember this seedling is going to have lots of fresh water delivered to it every 12 minutes. So it will all be off to a really good start. And one thing to remember too is, what are you going to plant in this grow bed? You've got to think about it a little bit. Now that was a Lebanese cucumber. Lebanese cucumbers love to climb. So what I'll do a little bit later on, I'll put a string up to the ceiling and I'll make that climb up the string. And that will save space, because remember I've only got a very small space here to get as many plants as I possibly can in. One thing about aquaponics is I can plant the plants much more densely than I do in a regular garden, because the plants are going to have nutrient delivered 24 hours a day and water delivered 24 hours a day. So I can pack the plants in as many as I can fit in that still give them enough space to grow. Like our lettuce bed over there, which we'll have a look at in a minute. You can put them as close as you like, or as close as you dare, let's put it that way. So I'm only going to put one Lebanese cucumber bush in. And we find from my wife and I that one Lebanese cucumber bush provides us with more Lebanese cucumbers than we can possibly use all summer long. Okay, now we've got some lettuce seeds, We bought a punnet of mixed Asian lettuce, which has got all sorts of things in it. Some really nice variety of lettuce. So once again we'll do the same thing. See the coloured leaves there and all that sort of stuff. I'll wash the roots off, wash the stuff out of the roots, the media that they grew them in. Get it all out, and there we've got reasonably clean roots there, and we discover that we've actually got several plants here. We've got quite a lot, and I find it a bit hard to get used to. When I go and buy seedlings from the seedling shop, I wind up with so many seedlings, in reality more than I can use, and I hate wasting them. You'll see just out of that one side of that punnet we're going to get quite a number of plants. There's 3, 4, I've actually got 7 out of just 1/4 of that punnet. 7 of those things. Now that will be more lettuce than I can possibly hope to use in any given day. And personally I found that the hardest thing to learn about aquaponics is the need to be sensible about my planting. I generally tend to plant too many of one thing at a time, and that's what happens. Because I go and buy some seedlings, for example, because I'm being lazy, I end up with so many seedlings and I plant them all out. Next thing you know, we've got more lettuce than we can even give to our neighbours. We're inflicting all these lettuce on our poor neighbours. We can't get rid of them. So you've got to be a little bit sensible about what you plant. And I find now with Lebanese cucumbers, for example, which is my wife's favourite, we only plant 1 seed at a time. And that's incredible. Isn't it wonderful what Mother Nature will do? If you do everything properly and you've got a balanced system, from just 1 seed, you'll have a summer's supply of Lebanese cucumber. Isn't that amazing? So we'll go ahead now and we'll plant these lettuce. Once again, I just make a little hole with my hand, and I actually help the roots down into the bottom a little bit, and then just put the stones back around it. And stand the plant up and make sure it's standing up properly. See that? I'll just put my finger on and actually push the roots down a little bit. Put the stones back around it. That's just how easy it is, how easy it is. Look at that beautiful little plant. That'll grow up to a multicoloured lettuce leaf, which will just look great in a summer salad. It's ideal to keep the water level when your beds flood to about 1 inch or 25 millimetres below the surface of your grow media, whatever the grow media is. In this case, these lovely clay pebbles that we have here, and we always make sure that the water only comes up to within about 25 millimetre or 1 inch below the surface. The reason we do that is we don't want water, nutrient-rich water, exposed to sunlight, because when it's exposed to sunlight you'll get an algae problem very, very rapidly. You'll get algae growing all over your media, and algae is not good for your system in general. If in your system you decide to use ordinary drainage gravel, not the nice clay beads that we were showing you before, you'll notice that it's a little bit more difficult to plant into gravel. Because of the nature of gravel, because it's sharp-edged and it tends to lock itself together, it's a bit harder to get down in there. And if you're a lady and you've got soft hands, you'd never do this. You'd need to use a stick or something to plant into the gravel grow bed. But the principles are the same. We'd put the plant in there like that, and we'd just make sure that it was sitting nicely, and there we go. That's how you do it. When initiating a new system, one has to worry about or be concerned about the nitrogen cycle. In other words, cycling the system is the term that's often used. Some people find this difficult to understand, but it's really the conversion of the fish waste into matter that can be disposed of or used by the system. And in the case of aquaponics, we want the fish waste to become fertiliser for our plants, and we want the plants to clean the fish waste so it keeps the fish water nice and clean. So that process is referred to generally as the nitrogen cycle. So the fish give off ammonia as the main byproduct of the fish, and that comes partly from their gills and partly from their normal disposing of waste, their solid waste and liquid waste, and that is mainly ammonia. Now, in the fish tank and in the grow bed we have good bacteria that forms, naturally occurring good bacteria. We won't go into the botanical names or the official names of those, but there's two basic types of bacteria. The first one converts the ammonia to nitrite, and the second group of bacteria convert the nitrite to nitrate. And then the nitrate, of course, is able to be used by the plants. So that's how the process works in very simple terms. So you have fish waste that winds up being converted into nitrate, and then the plants use up the nitrate, and then the fish water is returned to the tank perfectly clean as far as the fish are concerned. We must flood and drain. It's a very important principle in aquaponics. And the reason we flood the bed is because we want to deliver the nutrients to the plants, and we want to deliver the nutrients to the bacteria that converts the ammonia to nitrates for the plants to use. Now, in order to do that evenly, it's best to flood the bed, because then the whole of the bed is filled with water. You can't possibly get any dry spots in the bed or blank spots in the bed when you flood the whole bed. And then, of course, when we drain the bed rapidly, we take away all the water, and that allows the roots of the plants to be oxygenated, and also allows the delivery of oxygen to the good bacteria that's working away in there, converting the ammonia to nitrates. I believe very much in the process of Mother Nature and Father Time. And Mother Nature is just absolutely wonderful the way it takes care of the fish waste and provides beautiful clean water back to the fish. Now, there are two ways in which we can cycle a system. There are two schools of thought on this. And the first one is the natural way, which is personally the one I prefer to use, and that is just to allow the system to mature naturally, and that will take 6 to 8 weeks for that to occur. We do that by having our tank set up. We've got our water in the tank, we've got our beads in the grow bed, and it's all ready to go. We've tested our pump, and we've got the cycle working very nicely. The auto siphon is discharging as it's supposed to, and it's very satisfying. Everything is flowing the way it's supposed to. Now, the good bacteria actually is naturally occurring in water and in the air, and you will find that it will establish itself without any assistance whatsoever over time. It takes 6 to 8 weeks, as I said, but it will establish itself. You simply do that by allowing the system to cycle. What I like to do is, first of all, to plant some plants. Straight away, first day, put some seedlings in the grow bed and get it going. We can keep those seedlings going quite easily by using a product called sea salt, or more commonly known as a seaweed extract. We've already mixed some sea salt or seaweed concentrate to the correct strength according to the bottle instructions, and we're going to add probably about a cup of that to the system when we first start up. That will go in there, and it will start to provide nutrient for the plants, because the plants need nutrient to start with. The seaweed concentrate is going to serve two purposes for us. It's going to add just a tiny little bit of ammonia to the system. Remember, seaweed extract doesn't have much nitrogen in it at all, but it has a little tiny bit. It's going to add a little bit to the system for the bacteria to kick off with. and it's also going to provide food for the plants while we're waiting for things to cycle. And we do that for about 2 weeks. We add a little bit of sea salt every day. We'll spray it on with a sprayer, spray it onto our plants and have it cycling away. You'll see the plants will be doing okay. They'll start to take nicely. They'll start to develop nice colour about them. And then at the 2 week period, I would then add my fish. There is a second method of cycling a system, which is often explained in aquarium circles, where they don't have plants to process their nitrates, so they're very careful about their very expensive fish. So there's another way you can do it, and that is by using urea. Urea is a fertiliser that you can obtain at any hardware shop or plant shop all around the world. In Australia it's called urea. It's very, very high in ammonia. Now if we were going to cycle the system that way, we would plant our plants as per usual, the same as I described before. Use a little bit of sea salt to keep the plants going initially for the first day or two, and then I'd add only half a teaspoon of urea, of pure urea, to the water and mix it in. Now that will provide an immediate source of ammonia for the system, and that will actually get the system going a little bit faster. But I really caution you to be careful about the amount of ammonia you use. I've seen lots of folk do that method, and after 2 or 3 days they think it's not going quick enough, so they start adding a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and next thing you know you've got a system that's in crisis. So 1 teaspoon a day or half a teaspoon a day, depending on the size of your system, and allow Mother Nature to take her time to create the good bacteria and let it work in your system. One thing to remember about both these good bacteria that exist in these systems is that they're very slow growing bacteria. They don't multiply rapidly overnight, so it will take some time for it to establish. And that's a good thing really, because it also takes time to destroy it. If something goes wrong and you don't have fish in your system for a few days, let's say for example you harvest all your fish and you're in a situation where you might be a week before you get some more fish, all your good bacteria is not going to die off. The size of the colony will drop off a little bit, but it won't die off completely. So it's a good thing that it takes time to establish. So there are 2 methods, the natural method and also the use of a urea, which is commonly called fishless cycling. And when you get the fish home, you have a tank prepared, a nursery tank of some description like I have here, that might be 100 or 200 litres in size, which you have a biofilter attached to, and you've got the water all pre-prepared, and you float the fish in the tank in their plastic bag for some hours, so the water temperature between the bag that the fish are in and the other become the same, and then you gradually add a little bit of water out of the fish tank into the bag after you open the bag, and then you release them over a period of time. And it's important to do that over a period of 2 or 3 hours so the fish have time to get used to the new temperature and the new water, and that way you'll minimise the number of fatalities you may have. It's fairly normal to lose some fish when you first get your fish home. It's not uncommon to lose 1 or 2 per 100 that suffer from the journey from the hatchery to your place. And then of course if you haven't allowed them to have time to acclimatise to the water temperature and the pH, you may have some more losses. It's perfectly normal to say lose 5% of your fish, although it's not desirable, but that's usually what happens. These jade perch came from the hatchery about a month ago, so they're doing quite well. As you can see the colouring on them. Jade perch grow exceptionally well in tanks. They're fairly even in size, and these jade perch can be purchased from Aussie Fish Hatchery for $1 a fish, plus freight, and they'll send them anywhere in Australia. We've now got our fish in the system. This is a very important point. We must now test our water with our test kit every single day to monitor the levels of ammonia and the levels of nitrate that are being produced in the system. Because as soon as you've added those fish will start to add ammonia to the system, and you need to keep an eye on it. Because remember, we probably haven't got much of the good bacteria in the system as yet. There'll only be a little tiny bit of it, and it needs to be handled very gently. So what you do is you monitor the fish water daily, every single day. If ammonia levels start to rise too high, you must cease feeding the fish immediately for a day or 2. The fish won't die if you don't feed them, and monitor your ammonia levels. You must go very carefully about this for the first 6 or 8 weeks. Whilst you're doing that, if the ammonia does get too high and you feel it's getting out of control, then you need to do a 1/3 water change. Now that's the safety measure that you need to use. It's a sad thing to do, but you'll have to get rid of 1/3 of the water and put 1/3 of fresh water in. Now be smart about it and put that 1/3 of water away in a tank, because you can reintroduce that into the system later as top up and reuse it again so you don't waste water. After about 6 or 8 weeks, you'll find that the system will have balanced nicely. You'll know that by your water tests, because the ammonia in your test every day will be quite low and remain fairly constantly low, and you'll be able to detect nitrates and nitrite in your system that is being used up by the plants. You'll be able to detect that in the water tests. Here we have a freshwater test kit that we use regularly to test our water, especially in the early stages. Remember what we said about when we're cycling our system, that we need to test our water daily, and that's absolutely imperative. Don't think that you can get away without testing it, because in the first 6 to 8 weeks you must test your water daily, and from then on I recommend you test your water at least weekly, or if some event occurs. For example, if you take some fish out of the system, or you have a fish die, or something appears not to be right, first thing you do is test the water to see what's happening. Now there's three tests that we're really interested in, and that is pH, ammonia and nitrate. We can also test for nitrite, but that's not quite so important, because if the nitrate is there and the ammonia is there, then the nitrite will be there in the middle. But as a matter of interest, you should do that occasionally, but not necessary every time. So we'll start off by doing an ammonia test. We have a vial here which we fill with water from our system. You'll notice there's a mark on the side of the vial. You just flick it like so till you get the water down to level with the mark. See that there? We've got it down to level with the mark. Now we just need to put it down for a second, and we get out our ammonia test bottle, and we'll notice that they're in two. There's bottle 1 and there's bottle 2. And the instructions are clearly shown on each bottle. This one says add 8 drops, so we'll do that. We've got a kiddie proof lid on it. You have to hold that to one side while you unscrew the lid, and we'll just carefully add 8 drops. Okay, there's 8 drops. We'll put the lid on our vial like so, and we'll give it a little shake. Then we'll leave it stand for 30 seconds or so right there while we prepare our next bottle. Second bottle, bottle number 2, clearly labelled 8 more drops. So we'll get our vial, undo our lid and add 8 drops. Okay, fasten the lid, put our top back on and give it a good shake. Now we have to leave it stand for about 5 minutes for the dye to take, and will give us a reading. When the 5 minutes is up, we have cards here. You can see these cards that come with the kit, the colour cards that will give us, and here's the ammonia colour card. And judging by the colour that the material will become, we'll see what our ammonia level is. Now in a system normal, we would call normal in this range here. Those first 3 colours is normal. When it starts to get down to that colour, the alarm bell should be ringing. It's time for you to start doing something like reducing the amount of food you're giving your fish, or adding some more water perhaps if the water level's gone down. If you get down to this level, and if you get down to here, you're going to have dead fish, I'm sorry to tell you. So that's the safe range. That's let's take some notice range, and here we're in trouble range if it keeps going that far. Okay, let's examine our vial. A couple of minutes have gone by, and we can see there's really not much change happening, but I would say that we're between here and here. Is that what you'd say? I think it's between there and there, maybe between there and there. But anyway, the range is perfectly within normal. We would expect to find some ammonia in the system, because quite logically, if there was no ammonia at all, it would mean that we've got miles too many grow beds, or we've got dead fish or something. There's no fish in the system, because the fish generate ammonia in their normal everyday activity. So there must be some ammonia in the system. So don't be alarmed if you always test and you always find like this that you're going to get an ammonia reading like we have. We're going to prepare our second vial, and our second test we're going to do today is a test for nitrate. We want to know if there's nitrate in the system, and that will show that our bacteria, our 2 lots of good bacteria, are doing their work and converting the ammonia from ammonia to nitrite, and then from nitrite to nitrate. So we're going to test for nitrate. We've filled our vial, we've shaken it down till it's level with the line, the same as we did with the ammonia test. We also should make sure that we've washed the vial out first with some water from the fish system, so that we don't have it contaminated with the previous test. And this is one thing we don't do. We don't put our finger over the end of it and shake it like that, because we may have some sort of contaminant on our finger that will affect the test and give us a wrong reading. So because I've done that now, I'll have to start again. Wash the bottle out and get a fresh lot of water in the bottle. in the vial, sorry, and shake it down till I've got it at the right level, which is right there. And now I'll get my bottles of nitrate tester. Here we go, and there's what, same again. There's bottle 1 and bottle 2. And the instructions are clear on the front of the bottles. And in this case we add 10 drops. So once again, the kiddie safe lid, we'll undo the lid and we'll count 10 drops into our vial. Because I'm a boy, I can't do two things at once. I can only count. I have to stop talking while I count. We'll give it a shake, same as we did before. Let it settle for a minute, and then we'll get bottle number 2. Make sure you check the label. Yes, this is bottle number 2. I'll take the lid off, and I'll add 10 drops to the vial. Fasten the lid back on so it's kiddie proof, and we'll give it a good shake. Now the same thing again, we need to leave that sit for 5 minutes or so to let the chemical do its trick, and we'll then find the card which tells us freshwater nitrate. That's this card here, and we'll see the same as before. We've got levels that are safe and not safe. Normal readings would be in this range here from top down to the bottom, down to halfway through. I'm sorry. If you have readings right down to here, then it's time to do something about it. Remember, nitrates won't immediately kill your fish like ammonia will. Ammonia is deadly poisonous to the fish. Nitrates won't kill them straight away. You could actually have high concentrations of nitrate for some time before it would start to damage your fish. But it's still not an ideal situation. Therefore, I like to apply the same rule for nitrate levels. When you're down to the halfway mark, it's time to do something about it. And the way to deal with nitrates, of course, is 1, stop feeding the fish, so you cut down on the cycle a little bit, or a smarter way is to plant more plants so we get more veggies to use up the nitrates. Okay, a few minutes have passed by now and we'll look at our vial. And let's examine the colour. This is a good healthy system we've got running here, so we can see by the colour that there are nitrates present. Not too many, it's quite good actually. I'd say that colour is somewhere between there and there. And so we've got some nitrates in the system. We're now going to do a pH test. Now pH is very important. Once again, Mother Nature is amazing. Once the system is in balance, you'll find the pH will remain steady, somewhere between 6 and 7. It's just amazing. I find that with these clay pebbles in a system, the pH tends to be a little bit on the lower side, whereas when I use ordinary gravel, the pH tends to be up just a little on the high side of 6. I think the reason for that is because of the type of stone it is. But I'm not really sure about that, but I think that's what it is, because those kind of results are fairly consistent. pH is very important to the bacteria. If the pH is too low or too high, you'll find it'll damage your bacteria colony. And besides that, it's not good for the fish anyway. And a lot of the plants don't like to grow outside that pH range. So the ideal is to keep our pH in that range. When we're cycling the system first up in that, remember that 6 or 8 weeks we talked about? You may have quite large pH swings in that period of time. You may need to add some pH down, or in the case of raising your pH up, you may have to use some bicarbonate of soda to raise your pH up a bit. But once again, when you do it very gently. And I'm only talking about the first 6 or 8 weeks of the system while it's still cycling. Once the system's cycled, you'll be absolutely amazed at Mother Nature, how the system will settle down to a pH of somewhere between 6 and 7, depending on your area that you live in and the stone you've used, and it will just remain there rock solid. It's absolutely marvellous. Anyway, we'll test this system now and we'll see what we've got. We have a high range solution and we have a standard solution. I'm going to do the test with the standard solution because I expect my system to be in the normal range between 6 and 7. If when I'm cycling sometimes, cycling the system in that first 6 or 8 weeks, we may find that we have a rapid rise in pH, and that's why we need this other test to see how high it has really gone. But under most circumstances, when the system is cycled, we'll just use this one here. Once again, it's clearly labelled, pH test, and we can see there is 3 drops required. Put the solution in, add our cap, and we'll give it a bit of a shake. Once again, we'll give it a couple of minutes to settle down. We'll pick up our vial, we'll let it stand for a minute or two, and we're going to compare it with our chart. And this is our standard range chart, and you can see that the colour of this fluid will give us a reading of exactly 6 actually. So that bears out what I thought would happen. Because we're using the expanded clay pebbles, and these clay pebbles tend to be slightly on the low side as far as pH goes, I find that these systems sit neatly all the time between 6 and 6.2. They hardly ever move. The only time they do move a little bit is when I add a lot more water from the dam down the back, because the water coming straight out of the dam is actually very close to 7 in pH. So when I add that to the system, it'll bump the system pH up for a couple of days, and then it will settle right back down again to 6.2 or 6 without need of any intervention by me. Isn't nature marvellous? Over time, all your systems will tend to gradually drift down in pH, and it can become a bit difficult to try and keep it between 6 and 7. One method that I've found works very well is the addition of eggshells to my system, because eggshell is pure calcium carbonate, and that will help keep my system above 6, because obviously if the system is going into acid, then it will eat away the eggshells as it requires it, and it will lift the pH and keep it just above 6. So an easy way of doing that is get a bit of old pantyhose. Don't pinch your wife's new pantyhose, you'll be in trouble for that. And just cut it up, make a little bag out of it. Now the eggshells that I have here I've saved over a period of time out of the kitchen. And what I've done is I've put them in a ice cream container, and I've put them in the microwave, and I've nuked them in the microwave to kill any bacteria that might be on them. And now I'll load this up with some eggshells. Remember, I've nuked these already in the microwave to kill any bacteria that might be in there. And then I'll just tie the bag off. I could put a lot more in there if I wanted to really fill the bag up. I'll tie that off. I can crush them up a little bit, like so, and I've got a nice little bag of eggshells now. And then I can just bury this in amongst the media. Put it down there in a place where you know where it is, so you can come back and have a look at it in 3 months' time and see how it's going. Another product I could use if I wanted to was go to an aquarium shop and buy some crushed coral. Same idea, it'll do the same job for you. So there's a good tip on how to keep your pH above 6. A common question asked by people is, how many fish can I put in a system, and how many grow beds do I need to balance my fish tank? Because aquaponics is all about balance. We must achieve balance in the system, because that's how nature works. And really in aquaponics what we're doing is employing the best features of nature to provide us with beautiful fish and vegetables, clean organic fish and vegetables for our home. So as a rule of thumb, we find that the number of grow beds to the volume of fish tank, it's actually a volume thing. So if we've got a 1,000 litre tank, for example, we can have 1,000 litres in volume of grow bed. Now that's a good, safe, manageable way to do it, 1-to-1 ratio. You can push it to 3-to-1 actually. In big commercial systems, that's what we do. We build it to a system of three lots of grow beds to 1 ratio of the fish tank. But for domestic systems, 1-to-1 is really good. Actually in this system you can see we've actually got 3 grow beds, and the ratio here is actually only 3/4-to-1. So we could actually put more grow beds on this, quite a number if we wanted to. We can stack another on the side, another on the side, and another on the back if we wanted to make it into a really dynamic veggie producing system. Now as to the number of fish we put in a tank, the ratio that I like to work to is 1 fish per 10 litres of water, or 1 fish per 2.5 gallons of water. Some of you might think that's a bit high, but it's not really. Because for example, if we were to start off with this tank here, which is 900 and something litres, which is near enough to 1,000 litres for the mathematics of it, that means with 1 fish per 10 litres, we could put 100 baby fish in here for them to grow out for us to eat. And you might look at the tank and think, oh, that's terrible, that's so crowded. But it's not really, because what happens is the fish don't grow at all the same rate. And as the fish come up towards the 12-month period, you'll find that the heavy eaters, the ones that are the gutses of the family, so to speak, they'll grow much more quickly. So they'll be the first that we'll introduce to the barbecue. So 9 months down the track, we will start taking fish out on a weekly basis to eat the fish. And when we do that, the fish that are left behind will grow up more rapidly. You'll find a few more fish will grow up rapidly. So we will be harvesting that bunch of fish right down to the last fish for about 4 or 5 months. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Sometimes I get asked by people, a common thing is, someone rings up, they're usually a retiree, their kids have left home, and they've got this beautiful big swimming pool, 50 or even 100,000 litre swimming pool, and they say, wow, I'm into this aquaponics, I'm going to fill it up with fish. The problem with that is, again, is the ratio. Because if you had 100,000 litres of swimming pool filled with fish, which would be wonderful, you would need 100,000 litres of volume of grow bed to balance it. And in most suburban situations, that would be simply impossible. You'd have to knock the house down to put grow beds there. So the scenario of a swimming pool really won't work in an aquaponics situation, because you can't get the number of grow beds that you need to balance the system. And I just emphasise over and over again, Mother Nature requires that we have a balance in the system. If you've got an unbalanced system, you'll defeat the entire purpose. You'll have plant growth that's not rigorous, you'll have fish that are not healthy, and that's just not on. We've got these grow beds here that are about 6 to 8 weeks old now, and they're really well established, as you can see, and we've achieved a nice balance with the number of fish we've got in the fish tank, and the fish are growing. And let's ask the question, what happens when the fish grow and they're obviously producing more nutrient? Well, the obvious answer is to add more grow beds. So we've got some beds here that you can see we've just added to this system. Probably a little bit early for us because we've got 150 fish in that tank, but they're still quite small. But we've added these grow beds so that we can cope with the extra nutrient that the fish are going to be producing. And you can see it's already doing very well. Look at the plants, the growth is just beautiful. Now these plants are actually suffering a little bit from lack of nutrient because the fish are so small, and we've just suddenly doubled the capacity of our system by having double the grow beds. So we can assist that a little bit by giving a little dose of sea salt, seaweed extract every day, putting into the system, which is what I do for these beds, to make sure that there's enough nutrient for the plants. But it will come into balance slowly now. As my fish grow, these beds will come into balance and everything will just be great. I would rather have too many grow beds and too many plants than having the other way around, because you can't afford to let your fish water get into a bad state for the fish, because you'll have dead fish or sick fish, and that's not good. If your plants are a little bit yellow, that's a better situation than being the other way, where there's too much nutrient that's not being taken care of. So that's an important point to remember. When in doubt, add more grow beds, because you just simply can't go wrong by doing that. I should point out though that if I was to do a mass planting of say one crop, and I did that when I first started, I'd put a whole lot of corn in. And the result is then that I'd harvest it all at once, and suddenly you'd have grow beds with nothing in them. That's just not good for an aquaponic system, because all of a sudden you're going to have a big imbalance in the nutrient uptake of your system. So what you need to do, and what I'm still learning to do, I must be honest, is learning to plant a variety and trying to plant just a few so that I harvest something every other day. And I've never got a grow bed that's totally empty, and I really don't often have a grow bed that's totally full either. So you can keep rotating your crops, hence the need for more grow beds. There's never enough grow beds, I can tell you, because there's never enough fish. You always want more. I'd just like to talk to you about shading your aquaponics system. Some people do forget about the importance of that, and in an ideal world I would say that every circumstance you need a greenhouse of some sort or another, because your system works much better if you've got protection for it. If we were to get a lot of rain and our system was in the open, then we would have quite a big disturbance of the nutrient balance in our system, and that's not good. Actually, the fish wouldn't mind a lot of fresh water, that's for sure, but the garden beds would be disturbed and the nutrient balance would be thrown out. And besides that, you may have some flooding, you may have overflowing, you may have fish escape, all sorts of things can happen if the system is not covered. And in Australia, we've got probably the three main fish that people like to raise in tanks. There's silver perch, jade perch, and perhaps barramundi, and even Murray cod. Murray cod and barramundi have got this terrible habit of eating their friends. So when you raise Murray cod and barramundi, you have to really be very careful about the way you do it, and that's another whole subject in itself actually, to stop them from eating themselves. But the safest fish to raise are jade perch and silver perch. Jade perch in particular are a wonderful fish because they grow out quite evenly in size, they grow quite quickly, they don't try to eat each other, and they actually eat, as well as eating worms and pellets and things like that, they absolutely love your spare lettuce leaves and other kind of greenery that you throw into the tank. So you can give the fish quite easily a really nice balanced diet if you're raising jade perch and silver perch. Look at that. That's a beautiful silver perch, weighing about 1.5, 1.7 kilos. This fish is about 2 years old, slightly less than 2 years old. It comes from the hatchery as a fingerling, about that long between my fingers, say about 25 millimeters, 30 millimeters in size, 1 inch for the American market, and it's grown to that size in less than 2 years. From now on, this fish will grow much more slowly, but it's possible it will get up to 5 or 6 kilos if I keep it long enough. We just better put the poor guy back before he suffers any great drama. They are native to Australia. This particular type of perch is native to Australia, and they grow well in tanks, although jade perch do grow better than silver perch, but they adapt really well to tank culture. They like being in tanks, and they're a very good fish to eat. They're lovely to eat. And in growing them in tanks, disease is almost unknown in homegrown fish. If you look after your water quality and you keep the plants growing nicely, you can be absolutely assured that you'll get fish that's pure and free of all the sorts of nasties that people are talking about and worrying about all the time these days, the fish that comes from the supermarket. At last, we have a jade perch. Look at this beautiful fish. Jade perch, one of the characteristics of jade perch is that they have a spot or two randomly on their sides. You can see the black spots here. Sometimes the spots are quite large. See on the other side of the fish? See the spots on them? And see the beautiful jade colour, hence the common name, jade perch. See the beautiful colour on them? Now this specimen is about 1.6 kilos in size and very healthy and really should be on a barbecue plate. But, whoops, he got away. Jade perch, quite coincidentally, the CSIRO a number of years ago did studies on these fish and found the jade perch have the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids of any fish in the world, and that's just absolutely amazing, because there we have a freshwater species growing in central Queensland, and it's absolutely loaded with omega-3 fatty acids. So my choice of fish to grow is jade perch for that very reason. They're a beautiful fish to grow. They adapt exceptionally well to tank culture. They grow quite uniformly in size in tanks, and in 12 months from a little tiny fingerling you'll have fish that are 800 grams to a kilo, which is termed to be plate size. It'll be a bit hard to catch them here, but we'll see if we can catch one. Yep, it's a Murray cod. Here we go, beautiful Murray cod. Aren't they a pretty fish? We've got about 150 Murray cod in this tank, and these Murray cod were fingerlings in January this year, so they're now in their 9th month. So they've been through winter, they haven't grown much during winter, but now the spring is here, they will start to grow quite rapidly, and we expect another 6 months we'll have beautiful plate-sized Murray cod here. Our tank and fish tank system here is really good for batching your fish. A lot of people wonder, how can I get the next batch of fish started? Because oftentimes if you put smaller fish in with bigger fish, depending on the species, the smaller fish will be eaten. For example, with barramundi that would happen, with Murray cod that would happen. The bigger fish would eat the smaller fish. So with our fingerling tank that we have here sitting atop our main fish tank, this is a 250 litre or around about 70 or 80 gallon tank. And when our fish down the bottom here are half grown, they're about the 6 or 7 month stage, we'll then get another batch of fingerlings and we'll put them here in our fingerling tank. And the water is fed back from our grow beds behind me, and it's pumped partly into the fish tank and partly into the fingerling tank above. So we've got they're sharing the same water, the same temperature, the same amount of nutrient, everything is working fine, and yet we've got another batch of fish. When we've consumed all these ones, we've taken them out and we've used them, we then transfer these fish down and we then get another batch of fish to be coming up along behind that. So that's how you can have a continuous flow of protein for you and your family coming through your aquaponics system. This is our nursery tank for sleepy cod. You see we have over 100 sleepy cod in this tank. They're little tiny fellows. These came from the hatchery about a month ago as well. So they will be a year to get to the same size as the ones in the other tank, and 2 years before they're ready to eat. I'll just move these plants back out of the way. And we look in here, this is our sleepy cod tank. We have in here 125 sleepy cod. As you can see by the name, they're lying around having a sleep. Let's see if I can catch one here for you. Here we go, beautiful sleepy cod. Now this fish is exactly 1 year old, They're slow growing, they don't grow very fast. Whoops, you got away. But I am told that they are the best eating fish on the face of the planet. Okay, be nice. Open your big mouth and show everyone what a big mouth you've got. There we go, look at that mouth. Sleepy cod are known in Asia as the marbled Kobe fish, and they're highly prized as an eating fish. It's said that they are the best of all the freshwater species for a table fish, and I'm yet to find that out. Yet they take about 2 years to get to plate size, which is said to be from 800 grams to a kilo in size. So that's the sleepy cod, and as you can see by their habit, they just lay around all day sleeping. They're a tropical fish, so you need to keep the water heated during winter months, up to at least 18 degrees for them to continue to eat and grow, and then in the summertime of course they'll take off even more, and by December 09 we'll have some wonderful barbecues, some sleepy cod barbecues. We need to consider what fish is most suitable for your area. Obviously in Australia we have a great range of climate from far north Queensland right down to the southern states, and not all fish are suitable for all areas. And it's a bit difficult if you try and raise a tropical fish in Melbourne, for example. Obviously you're going to have heating problems, and vice versa if you try and raise a fish that's native to the southern states in North Queensland, you'll have cooling problems. So it's best to choose a fish that's pretty much native to your area if you can. In Australia we've got a wide variety of really good Australian native fish that we can use, and the first one I want to talk about is jade perch. It's actually my favourite fish because over a period of time I've tried all sorts of fish and I keep coming back to jade perch. Jade perch are very hardy, they grow well in tanks, they're really well adapted to tanks. They will eat pellets or worms or African fly larvae, black soldier fly larvae, really to raise them easily. They're really a Brisbane North fish, or let's say a central New South Wales North kind of fish, because they're native to the Barcoo River system and they're kind of semi-tropical. So if you're any further south than that, you'll need to heat the fish tank in winter, and that can become expensive. Silver perch is really native to most of the east coast of Australia from the north to the south, and it's a very hardy fish. It's really a good beginner's fish. It's pretty hard to kill silver perch actually, and they grow reasonably well in tanks. They don't grow as well as jade perch. You have a greater variety in size. Some don't grow very much, others grow well, but for home consumption they're pretty hard to beat, silver perch, and you can get them from hatcheries from Melbourne right through to central Queensland. So silver perch is a really good one to start with. Murray cod are becoming more readily available now from hatcheries all over Australia, and they really are a fish that's from medium water to cold water. For example, say Brisbane South is a good area to raise Murray cod. Murray cod don't mind if the water gets down to let's say 5 degrees C. They'll survive that quite well without heating, and they'll still continue to feed. But if the water gets up to 30 degrees C, you'll have deaths with Murray cod. Now Murray cod, the disadvantage with them is they're a bit like our friends barramundi. They tend to like eating each other, although not to the same extent as barramundi, and they seem to have just unexplained deaths as you go along. The batch that I'm raising now, I started off with 200, and I'm probably down to about 150, and the other 50 have just died for no real apparent reason. The water quality is good, all the parameters are great, but we have some deaths. We're yet to learn more about raising Murray cod in tanks. Now sleepy cod come from North Queensland. They're a tropical to semi-tropical fish, and they will require heating in winter. They're very temperature sensitive in the sense that they go right off their food, and they are susceptible to disease if they're in cold water. I have found that they don't die if the water gets down to say 15 or 12 degrees C, but they certainly don't feed, and they certainly don't do very well. The old favourite barramundi, people always ask me, can I raise barramundi? Of course you can, but barramundi are very much a warm water fish, so I wouldn't attempt barramundi really unless I was from say Brisbane North or central New South Wales North. But the big drawback with barramundi is that they're a bit hard to raise for the home grower because they have this bad habit of eating each other. So you need to grade them regularly, in other words try and keep all the sizes the same, because fish just don't grow at the same rate. You'll get one fellow that's the pig of the pack, as we say, and he'll get most of the food and he'll grow more rapidly. And then unfortunately with barramundi, as soon as he's a little bit bigger than some of the other guys, he sees them as breakfast. And so you'll experience a lot of losses with barramundi unless you're prepared to have multiple tanks and you're prepared to grade them. A good old favourite for southerners is trout. but trout are very temperature sensitive. The water must be below 23 degrees. The temperatures above that very much will result in trout deaths. Trout have to have really pristine water. The water quality's got to be really great, but they are wonderful feeders. They feed very, very readily. They'll eat almost anything, and they grow quite rapidly. Another variety of fish is commonly called redfin, or English perch, which is a fish that's been brought here by our friends the Englishmen. And in England it's regarded as a very good sport fish, I believe. In Australia, in most states of Australia, it's regarded as a pest fish and is illegal, but you can keep them in South Australia. I'm not sure what the rules are. And of course then there's the big one overseas in America and Europe is tilapia. Now tilapia is an excellent fish for home aquaculture and for home aquaponics. It's just a wonderful fish for that because it self-breeds very, very well. And in the States they've done quite a lot of selective breeding to come up with really good tank varieties that grow excellently well. They'll eat vegetation, they'll eat pellets, so they're just a wonderful fish for home aquaculture. They are very, very tolerant of poor water quality. You can keep them in very, very high densities, so they're absolutely excellent for home aquaculture and home aquaponics. The only problem is in Australia they are highly illegal in all the eastern states. I think the fine's about $130,000 for possessing a tilapia, dead or alive. So even though they'd be great for our purposes, you simply can't have them. In Western Australia they are legal in certain circumstances. I'm not sure what that is. But tilapia is a good one if you're in anywhere else but in Australia. Look at these strawberries here and here. Look, there's more of them everywhere you look. More strawberries coming up here. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? All grown on fish poo. Wonderful, wonderful strawberries. Oh, look what I found. Oh, how awful. I think I'll have to eat it. Yeah, people often comment that come here to visit our garden, they comment on how green everything is, and it's true. And when we first started growing it, both my wife and I used to comment that the lettuce looked almost as if they were made of plastic. They're so healthy and so strong. Look at that beautiful Cos lettuce leaf. You can grow lettuce in one of these systems. It takes 24 days in a little seed pot to raise the lettuce seed from planting it to get it ready to plant out, and putting in this garden bed. 24 days later you've got a mature lettuce. And the reason the plants are so healthy, there's really no mystery to it, is the plants are constantly supplied with water. Every 12 minutes the system goes and the garden bed is completely flooded, and of course they are constantly supplied with beautiful nutrient from the fish. So the plants have always got plenty of nutrient and plenty of water. So why wouldn't they be perfect plants? Let's just take a look down in the gravel grow bed now. This gravel grow bed is just on 3 years old. And you'll see what happens in the gravel grow bed on a 3-year period. You can see there's water in there because this system is in the middle of a cycle, a pump cycle. And you can see what's developed in there. See all that stuff on my fingers? That's actually fish poo. Sounds terrible, but that's what it is. They're the fish solids that have accumulated in the system. It's 3 years old, and you can imagine all the goodies in there that the plants love to eat. Because your aquaponic system works so well, you're going to be able to grow so much stuff in a very small space. And so we've got to make good use of our vertical space as well. And you'll notice here that I've got an overhead wire, and I've got these strings that we tie our tomato bushes up on. We grow climbing beans by choice because we can make good use of vertical space. We've got this device here which is commercially available. It's called a tomato hook. It's just simply a wire device that's got a couple of meters of string, about 5 or 6 meters of string on it. And what we do is we hook that over our wire and we tie the string to our tomato plant or our bean vine, and that way we can get it to grow up and we can make good use of vertical space. The other fascinating thing about aquaponics is that you don't have to rest the garden beds like you do in a normal garden situation. We can just keep growing crops over and over again in the same space because of the wonders of it all. We're delivering nutrient all the time to the garden bed, and we're delivering water to it all the time. Fresh, nutrient-rich water is being delivered over and over again, and we simply find we can just keep growing veggies all the time, all year round. And in fact, I'm amazed at the tomato bushes we can grow. We find they have a life of about 9 to 12 months in the one bush, and we just keep cropping and keep cropping and keep cropping because of this wonder of having nutrient and water delivered to it constantly all the time. This was put in as a seedling about 5 to 6 weeks ago. It's a seedling. Look at the root system. Lovely and clean. Beautiful root system. Now we can plant straight back into that area that's come on in that period of time, and that is as solid as a rock. You know, that's a really solid cabbage. If we were to spray any kind of insecticide on the vegetables, that would kill the fish. So aquaponics by its very nature is organic, and that's a wonderful thing. Particular plants like Asian greens are very susceptible to grubs, so we find we can control that by companion planting with marigolds in amongst it, for example, and also by spraying with a garlic and sea salt mixture. It's sometimes a good idea to add a little bit of household detergent to your mixture, just a couple of drops, because that will help wet the leaves of the plant. You can see here that the mixture doesn't stick to the cabbage leaf too well unless I add a little bit of soap, which will help. Not too much soap because we don't want to disturb the fish, but just enough to make the mixture wet, so we can actually wet the leaves with our sea salt and garlic mixture. Look at this beautiful coriander plant. Isn't that glorious? That was a seedling only 3 weeks ago. Isn't that beautiful? The beautiful onions coming in here. We're trying to see how well onions will grow in these clay pebbles, and I think they're going to grow very well. They were standing up nicely a few days ago before these plants started to take up. In the back here we've got some parsley. We always have to have some parsley. See the parsley bush there? So you need to plant it in a back corner somewhere because it tries to take over after a while. And mint, I'll give you a tip of advice. Don't grow mint in an aquaponics system. It goes berserk. It does. It ends up growing through all the pipes and it just takes over. It becomes a monster plant. We call it mint the monster plant. Look what we found here. Mr. Grub having a lovely feed of my broccoli bush. So we will catch Mr. Grub and we'll drop him down the hole into the fish tank. And Mr. Grub will become dinner for some lucky fish. Now we're going to feed the fish. We've got here a quantity of pellets. These are very good quality pellets. We've chosen these especially because they have no land animal content at all. They only are made from fish meal and soy meal. So they're very good quality pellets. A lot of people are worried about the fish food, what kind of food goes into the fish, because obviously what we put into the fish is what we're going to ultimately eat ourselves. So that's why we don't want to have fish pellets that have any land animal content. We don't want, you know, old dead cows to be used to feed our fish. So we've chosen these pellets very carefully. And there we are, that's what they look like. We're going to feed our sleepy cod right now, and they feed best in the afternoon. As you can see, the sun is going down. So we're going to feed our sleepy cod, and we'll just wake them up with a few handfuls of pellets playing on the thing, and we'll watch to see them come up to get the pellets. The amount of food that you give your fish depends entirely on how much they eat. A common problem in a new aquaponics system is people overfeed their fish. Now if you overfeed the fish, that fish food will lie on the bottom of the tank and it will go rotten and will actually generate much more ammonia than the fish are producing themselves. A lot of people, when they start with their system, they're having a problem balancing the system and getting the ammonia dealt with, and the problem is really because they're overfeeding their fish. So what you do is use a floating fish food. I find is easier. You throw the pellets onto the surface of the water and you watch the fish come up and take it, and they quickly get used to that idea, and you just observe them feeding. When their feeding slows down, then that's enough. Don't give them any more fish food. And if you've made a measure of that amount of food that you've given them, then you know that that's what they should get every day. Whether it's a once a day fish food or twice a day food, then that's what you give them. Another great way to feed your fish is with vegetable matter. And this applies to jade perch, silver perch and tilapia. They love to eat vegetable matter. And here's an example of a lettuce bush that I've grown that's starting to run and go to seed. It's still good for food for us, mind you. You just pluck the leaves off. But if I throw that into my fish tank here of jade perch, 3 days later, this is what I've got. Have a look at that. Just how they've stripped those leaves, absolutely stripped them off. It just gives you an idea as to how much jade perch, silver perch and tilapia love vegetable matter. So that's another great way to get nutrient into your system, by recycling some of your vegetable matter. Any lettuce that you don't eat yourself, the fish will clean up for you and love every minute of it. The fish are the most efficient producer of body weight per food put in, and that's a wonderful thing about keeping fish at home. For example, out of the barramundi industry, where there's good data available from, they say that a well-run farm from 1.2 kilos of food will produce 1 kilo of fish body weight. Not so efficient, 2 kilos of fish food will produce 1 kilo of fish weight. Now that is very, very efficient if you're feeding a fish on something like a manufactured food like pellets. So it's very low cost. And for example, here in Australia at the moment, if you were to buy a fingerling for $1, allowing for some fingerlings that die, and the cost of fish food and electricity to get that to maturity, to plate size, that 1 kilo fish will cost you about $6. Now that is really, really very cheap food. Much cheaper than the $32 that I saw fish for sale in one of the big supermarkets just the other day. $32 a kilo. So $6 for clean, homegrown fish is a real bargain. I'm here at my friend Gary Donaldson's place. Actually, Gary's written the Urban Aquaponics Manual, which is a really excellent manual on the whole aquaponics business, and I highly recommend it. We've come here today to look at black soldier fly larvae and to also look at duckweed production, both really good food sources for our fish. Here we're looking at the black soldier fly larvae being produced for our fish food. And we're looking in front of us here at a biopod, which is a commercially made product that we can breed our black soldier fly larvae in. And we'll just come and have a close-up shot, and I'll lift the lid. And we can see what's happening in here. The black soldier larvae are busily consuming all the household scraps we've put in there, and you can see the larvae close up there. And we can also see some of the mature larvae here that's now walking up this gangplank, and they will very conveniently drop down in the chute there for us, so they're self-harvesting. They do that because they're ready to go to the next stage of their development, which is to go and find their way into the ground somewhere and turn into a fly, into a mature fly. And at that stage they would then fly up into the trees somewhere and they would mate. The average life cycle of the fly itself is only about 5 to 8 days, so they're not a problem around the home. You shouldn't get the idea that these flies will become a problem around the home, because they're just not interested in going into your house and being a nuisance. All they're interested in is consuming vast amounts of vegetable matter. They're really good at converting vegetable matter into protein for your fish. Take a look now at the harvesting chute. We can see that there's this tube attached, and the larvae have crawled up the inside of this ramp and they drop down in here. And let's just take this out. You see Madam is hanging around here thinking she's going to get some food. And we'll take a look inside here. These larvae are all fresh and clean, believe it or not, and ready to be thrown to our fish. That's if the chooks leave any behind. Okay, we've got here some frozen black soldier fly larvae that we're about to feed to the fish, and you can see they're quite hard. They're actually frozen. They don't look much different to what they did before we froze them. You can see I'll break one here, and you can see they're quite hard because they're frozen solid. So they're really good to feed the fish. Interestingly, this black soldier fly larvae is about 42% protein and about 30% fat. So they're really excellent fish food. And remember how we got them? We used our fish and we used our kitchen scraps, our veggie scraps, and recycled them via our compost bin, and all that wonderful protein and goodness and vitamins and minerals that would have been lost perhaps is now recycled and now going to our fish. Here's another food source for our fish. This one's known as duckweed. It's a freshwater, very, very small, minute plant that grows in fresh water with nutrient passing through it. And we can see here it just looks like a mat of material over the top of the water. But this stuff is 35 to 42% protein, so it's a really good source of food for fish. Now, not all fish will eat this, of course, but jade perch, silver perch, and those fish that are herbivorous will eat this wonderfully. They just love it. We gather it up in the summertime when it grows really well, and we freeze it into frozen blocks, and we keep them for wintertime feeding of our fish. We've got some quite good blocks of it here, and we just break bits of this off and throw it into our fish tank. We would feed about that much to, say, a tank that had 20 fish in it, for example, and that would be their morning's meal. Fish don't really eat all that much food, believe it or not. A common error people make when they start in aquaponics is they overfeed their fish. So what you would do is you'd feed the fish this, and you just watch and see how much of it they take up. When they've left it alone, you know they've had enough. The bathtub system is really easy to put together. First of all, you need to find a couple of old bathtubs for yourself. Now these can be found anywhere almost these days. So many people are doing renovations to homes that it's quite easy to pick up old bathtubs. Now I've filled the top container with gravel up to about 2/3 full and inserted into it the system, the auto siphon device, and the one below, and I've just sat them really on the ground. The tank that will become the fish tank is just simply sitting on the ground with some gravel around it to make it level and to just support it. It's that simple. It would take you no more than 5 minutes to do that. The grow bed itself is suspended on 6 Besser blocks or concrete blocks, 200mm by 400mm blocks, or in imperial 4-inch concrete blocks, and we just stack them up. Most bathtubs have a flat bottom on them, so it will just sit nicely on there. You may have to pack one end a little bit because it's not level. You know, the bathtub is made so it has a little bit of fall in it, so you'd want to level the bathtub, and you might need to pack one end with some plywood, something solid like that, or some fibro cement sheet, something that's solid to bring it up to level. And then you would insert the auto siphon device, run the plumbing, which is quite simple, and then fill it with gravel. Then all we have to do is hook up the pump, and you'll have the whole thing running in probably an hour and a half at the most. A really easy system to do to get you started in aquaponics. The pump system here, small pump, here it is, small pump, is bringing the water up and just over this, a very simple system over into the grow bed. We've got a tap here to regulate the amount of water that actually comes out of the end. You can see that water flow is quite low really. The auto siphon device will just give you a peek inside so you can see how it works. Here's the bell of the siphon, and we can see that the grow bed is now full of water, and the water is beginning to fall over the top of the upstand. And if we look down below, we will see it start to siphon. We'll just place this back inside and seal it up. Now if we swing down below, we can see the water starting to come out of the outlet back into the fish tank. And in a moment it will get a real go on. It will suck all the water out of the grow bed and return to the fish tank. And here it goes, full speed ahead. That is now rapidly removing all the water from the grow bed and putting it back to the fish tank. At the same time, the pump is still running. It is still running and pumping back into the top of the grow bed. So you've got a constant water flow into the grow bed and an intermittent drain out. So what's happening is we have slow fill and a rapid drain of the grow bed. The other good thing about this is too, it's actually a 1-to-1 ratio. We talked about the ratio of grow bed to fish tank, and both being the same size, obviously we've got the ratio just right for our purposes for a good starter kit at home. These standard bathtubs that I've got here have about a 300 litre capacity. So if we stick to our rule of thumb of 1 fish per 10 litres of water maximum, that means I could put 30 fish in this bathtub. Now initially, for your first system, I wouldn't put that many, I'd halve that, just for safety's sake, until you get used to how it all works. That's the best thing to do when you start. Be on the safe side and only have half the number of fish. I'm often asked questions about solar panels and can I run my system on solar? Right now we're striving to find the best solution for solar, and we're still a long way off actually, because solar panels are so expensive. I believe the technology will get better, but here's an example of a solar panel. It produces 40 watts of power. Now to run this little bathtub system, we would need 80 watts of power 24 hours a day. So if we do the sums, we would find we're going to need about 4 of these panels and a battery pack to run it. Unfortunately, that would cost you a whole lot more than setting up your initial system. Some people are prepared to pay for that, but personally, I think we've still got a long way to go before we can reach a really good solution for solar powering our systems. Some of our bigger systems, we're making them solar ready now because we've found pumps that are getting right down to the wattage that we want to run the systems adequately and well. But I stress again, it is possible, it's very doable, but also unfortunately expensive. We've just shown you this wonderful way to get started in aquaponics with the bathtub system, but we really should point out to you some of the disadvantages of it. And the first one is that it's just really too small to be stable. We have found through hard experience that the bigger the water volume that you employ in your system, the more stability you have overall. And that's stability in temperature, stability in pH, stability in neutral, in nutrient levels in the system. So it's very important to have a volume of water. And we found through hard experience that around about 1,000 litres or 250 gallon systems is about as small as you can go to really have a stable system. So whilst it's a good idea to start with this bathtub system, be prepared to have some failures if everything is not just absolutely right. And I really need to say that the cost of good infrastructure cannot be overlooked. Let's do a recap of what we've learned in this video. The first thing I hope we've established with you is that aquaponics is really easy. You just have to follow a few basic rules, use a bit of common sense, and you can have a very successful aquaponics system. The first thing I just want to recap is ratio. A lot of people ask questions about that. Remember, the ratio, the safe ratio for a home system is 1:1 by volume. So 1 volume of fish tank to 1 volume of grow bed. And remember, the ideal depth for a grow bed is 300mm or 1 foot. You could have shallower than that if you want to, remember we talked about that, but you'll get best results with a 1 foot or 300mm deep grow bed. So the ratio is 1:1 of water to grow bed. How many fish can I have? Well, once again, a safe ratio for home is 1 fish per 10 litres of water, or 1 fish for every 2.5 gallons of water. And that is based on the assumption that the fish are not all going to grow at the same rate and wind up as fully mature fish all at the same time. Remember, if in doubt, cut the volume of fish down just a little bit. You can always add more fish later. The other thing is volume of water, overall volume of water. The smaller the system and the less water you have in the system, the more prone the system is to instability. And we have found in our experimenting with different size systems that 1,000 litres or about 250 gallons is really about the minimum size system you can have and expect to have some stability. You can go smaller if you want to, but expect instability, expect big pH swings and temperature swings. What veggies can I grow in the system? Well, you can grow pretty much anything that grows above the ground, and you can grow some root crops too. But any kind of salad veggie or stuff that grows above the ground, tomatoes, corn, lettuce, all sorts of greenery can be successfully grown in an aquaponics system. All sorts of herbs. I have seen people with really wonderful herb gardens grown in an aquaponics system. What fish can I grow? Well, once again, we've covered the Australian natives with jade perch, silver perch, barramundi, Murray cod, sleepy cod, and of course for the Americas and for Europe, there's some perches that are really good, and tilapia is really the big one that people grow very successfully all over the world. I feed my fish. Remember, we've covered that. There are various ways. We could be lazy and use commercially available pellets, but if we want to avoid that, we can have a worm farm, we can have a black fly larvae farm, we can feed our fish lettuce and other such things as that. We can have a light above our tank and have insects fall into it. There's all sorts of ways we can be economical and give our fish a good wide variety of diet. And how do I cycle my system? It's only really a problem for the first 6 or 8 weeks, remember, in the early stages of the system. What I would always recommend people to do, first thing you do, set up your system, get everything cycling, your pumps are all working, everything's going great. Plant your plants, put the plants in, get them going. Keep your plants going with some sea salt, some seaweed extract to get the plants going. Then add your fish. And remember, as soon as you put the fish in and you start feeding, there's a possibility of an ammonia spike while the good bacteria sets up in your tanks and wells. What you need to do is, if you have an ammonia spike, change some water out, a 1/3 water change. And remember the slogan, when in doubt, change the water out. And the last thing, but not least of all, is bon appetit. Remember, have fun. You're growing good, clean, wholesome food for you and your family. And you can do it at home at your place. Excuse me, if you don't mind. I want to eat now. Thank you. This is just terrific.